This is KTVO's Good Morning Heartland.
Welcome back. The temperatures are starting to warm up, which means you may find yourself spending more time outdoors. It could also mean more chances, to be bothered by poison ivy. Dr. Puckett from Complete Family Medicine is here this morning to talk about symptoms to look out for and how to treat a rash if you get one. Good morning. How are you doing?
I'm doing well, thank you.
So tell me how poison ivy, oak, and other poisonous plants all tie together and produce the symptoms associated with them.
Well, we can have a variety of rashes from a variety of different plants. I mean, some of them it's just more of an allergic type reaction of getting irritated by some of the, a lot of things are pollinating, those sorts of things. And even some of the non-poison plants, even just their natural secretions that they have as a part of their waxy outer lining can cause us to get a little very minor allergic reaction. But whenever we're talking about poison plants, whether it be any of the variety, they cause a pretty major allergic type reaction. And so there's an oil that's a part of those plants. It's expressed on the leaves, on the bark, on the plant. Poison ivy can come in very small grass-like plants all the way up to huge vines that go hundreds of feet in the air. So they have a lot of different ways that they can present. But if that urushiol oil, the oil that's a part of that plant, gets on your skin in one way or another, whether you touch the plant directly or it's transferred to you from a dog or from a coat sleeve or glove, whatever it may be, once it gets on there and has about 4 hours to set up, then it penetrates down through the skin, and then the body sees that and says, whoa, that's not supposed to be here, and has a pretty major reaction. And so, everybody has different allergies and different reactions. And so some people will say that they're not allergic to poison ivy. And if those people have enough exposure over their life, it's very likely that eventually they will show a reaction. But some people can get quite a bit of exposure, not have a huge reaction. Others can get just a minor exposure and have a very large reaction.
Okay, so now let's talk about, exposure. One day I have it on my hand, the next day it shows up on my other hand. There's
a long-standing myth that it transfers, and really the only thing that transfers is the oil. So if I stick my hand into grab something in the brush and I get a large amount of oil on my wrist, and it really is pretty thick and concentrated, and then I touch it or skid across it and transfer a little bit over here and maybe elsewhere, it may show up here first, and then it may pop up in these other transferred locations over the next day or two, but it's not at all that the rash is spreading. So once you've washed that oil off, and so a good soap and water, washcloth, scrubbed after a shower after being in the woods, it's impossible for that rash to transfer to another person, to transfer to me. Again, it would go back to that oil. So if you have the oil in the coat sleeve and you put your arm back in the coat sleeve, you can get another exposure, but I can't transfer it from one person to another. So really important once we've been out in the woods that if you can do it in 4-hour increments, especially if you have bad problems with poison ivy, if you know you're going to be in that area, then coming back in, taking the shower, scrubbing good, can really limit the exposure. So it will pop up kind of like dominoes, but it's not at all spreading.
Okay, so what are some treatment options? Is it just, a topical you put on, cream? Are there injections? How does that work?
Yeah, so whenever you have the first bit of that poison ivy rash come up, which is pretty classic and easy to identify, starting with making sure that anything else that you have that you might have, making sure that coat and glove is out of the picture so that you don't have any exposure, ongoing exposure, and then just treating it initially with some over-the-counter steroid cream like a hydrocortisone. You can get over-the-counter at any of the drug or convenience stores. And then if it gets to the point where it's bigger than that, then sometimes we have to use a systemic steroid that turns the immune system off to let the body kind of clear that on out and kind of hit the reset button. And then also using any of the anti-itch stuff. So everything from taking Benadryl, even taking a Zantac, which is a stomach pill, because it has this little, has a weaker response to histamine, which is the itch chemical, but that can help. And then even making sure that if you're really itching really bad, you want to prevent yourself from getting a secondary cellulitis, a skin infection. And so trying to control that itch is pretty important.
Okay. So I know that we touched base a little bit about myths versus facts, but we're going to go ahead and kind of just go over them once again. So the first myth, scratching blisters will spread. And the fact is
that if there's still oil on top of that blister and you scratch that blister and then touch yourself elsewhere, it can spread. But the water that's inside that blister is not spreadable. It's not the urushiol oil. The oil's on the outside. So if you have showered good and are clean and one of those blisters breaks and some oil runs, it will not spread.
Okay. Now the myth that it's contagious. We talked about it, so it's
Same
not.
sort of deal. Only that oil. The oil's the contagious period. So after I've taken a shower, if I have some poison ivy, you're not going to spread it to other people.
Okay, another myth is if I have it once, I can't get it again.
Yeah, that's there's many of us in the Heartland who will say that that's not true because we've had it dozens and dozens of times. It's not one thing that we typically build up. The exposure that we get is so grand and the response is so grand that it's not like something where we can get a little bit of exposure like with an allergy shot where we become immune to it. It usually works the other way around. People don't have some natural immunity, and then they finally, the teeter-totter flips, and then they've got the allergic response, and then that's probably going to be there for the long haul.
Okay. Another myth, once allergic, always allergic.
Yeah. So once you've had that allergy, you can seek treatment, and there are some places that will do some desensitization. But typically, that myth of once allergic, always allergic for most of us is actually going to be true.
Okay. And finally, dead plants like dead poison ivy aren't toxic.
That oil has been found to be present on pieces of bark that have been ages and ages, decades and decades old. So it's all about that nasty oil.
Okay.
So a dead plant, a plant in the winter, absolutely all, we don't see as much poison ivy in the wintertime, but we certainly do see it, especially when people are out cutting wood and they're pulling vines and making a mess. Absolutely. So it's all about the oil.
All right. And keep that in mind next time you do go out. So what we'll do is we'll post everything on our website at KTVO.com. We'll link up Dr. Puckett's information with Complete Family Medicine if you have any questions or concerns. Again, thank you so much, Dr. Puckett.
My pleasure. Thank you.
And we'll be right back.